Mixing was always my least favorite part about completing my tracks because I was never getting the sound that I wanted. But after years of working on tracks, I've found my favorite mixing techniques that I think every producer should use in their tracks to make them sound more professional. Before we get started with the video, my name is John from Sandscape Audio. We're a music production resource community, and we post content like this all the time, so make sure you're subscribed here. Also, after the video, feel free to head over to sandscapeaudio.com and check out some of the resources that we have available over there. All right, so let's jump back into the video. The first tip I want to discuss is EQing the low end of every track that isn't the kick or the bass. In most cases, the low end is the foundation of the track, but too much can make it sound muddy and unprofessional. With elements like the kick and the bass, it's obviously important to have that low end present. If we pull up an EQ here, we could see where the kick is showing up predominantly on the EQ spectrum. So as you can see, a majority of the sound is ending up right in this 50 to 100 hertz section. And if we switch over to the bass, we can hear a similar frequency pattern here. So in most cases, those are the only two elements that we really want sitting right in that area. All right, now if we take a look at a different track, I have kind of an ARP lead here that's going throughout the chorus section, and it sounds just like a higher lead. But if we take a look at it on the EQ, we could see that there's a little bit of rumble in the low end, and we don't like that. So let's take a listen first. So as you can see, we had some really little spikes in the frequencies right down in this area here. And while you may not be able to hear them right away, or if you have them soloed out, or even if they're all mixed in the track, when you start adding layers of leads and chords, all of those low end frequencies are going to start stacking up and create a low rumble and a muddy mix. So all we have to do is just add this low cut filter right around 100, 150, between 100 and 200 is usually what I like to do. Depending on the sound, you might have to do a little bit more or less. And now when we listen to it back, not much has really changed. But like I said, after time, a bunch of those sounds added up with just a little bit of those low end rumbles is really going to make a big difference in the track and make it muddy. So we want to get on top of that sooner than later. Take them out as soon as the track goes in. And that way, once you start adding, you won't have that rumble in your final mix. All right, next we're going to take a look at adding width to the mix. All right, so there's a few ways we can do this. We can add reverb and delay. We can layer sounds. We can pan left and right. We can use widening plugins. Each technique is going to give you a different result. So let's take a look at reverb and delay. We have this nice vocal chop lead here. But it's going to sound much bigger when we throw some reverb on it. And then next we're going to add some ping pong delay. And this just means that the delay that you're going to hear is going to happen at different times on the left and the right sides. All right, so next we're going to add a layer. So basically what I did is I just duplicated that vocal chop lead that we had in that kind of high pitch sound, and I pitched it down 12 semitones, so one full octave, and we get this. And then we add our reverb and delay to that track as well. And we play them together. Another thing we can do, since we have these two layers, is we can pan one slightly left and one slightly right. And that's going to be different for every sound. Usually what I like to do is have 3 layers that I can pan. So I'll keep one in the center, and then usually I'll have 2 layers that are pretty similar, and then I'll pan them left and right. And that really kind of creates some depth in the track. And then the last thing we're going to talk about for a wider mix is you can use a plugin. And this one that we're looking at today is called Wider. Can't be any simpler. I believe this one is free. When you're using any kind of widening plugin, it's cool to just kind of mess around with the settings and see what sounds best for your particular track. All right, the next mixing tip that we're going to look at is not overusing reverb. I know early on I thought reverb was the solution to everything. I wanted to put it on every track, and I thought it made everything sound better. But as you spend a little bit more time producing, you realize that that's not always the case. It's smart to use 1 or 2 reverbs throughout your entire track. That way, if you do use a lot of reverb, it's consistent throughout. So there's a couple ways you could do this. You could just add a reverb right to your chain here. I like to use ChromaVerb a lot. It's a stock Logic plugin. And then once you have a reverb that you like, what you can do is you can just grab it here, press Option, and then drag it to whichever track you want to apply it on. And that'll keep your reverb consistent throughout, and you're not adding a different reverb on every track. Another way you can add 1 or 2 reverbs throughout your entire song in any track is to put them on a bus. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to hit Send here. We're going to go to Bus. We're just going to find an empty bus, and I'll hit 24. And then that's going to pop up in your mixer over here. So as you can see, we have bus 24 going to this aux send here. And now we can actually just apply any reverb right to this effects chain here. So I'm just going to take this one. It's already being used in the track. Just drag it over to here. Now instead of adding the reverb right here on the effects chain, we just have the bus, and we're just going to adjust how much the bus is sending to the channel. So any changes we want to make to the reverb, we make it directly on the bus, and that way the reverb gets changed on any track that's being sent to that bus. The next mixing tip we're going to look at is EQing the reverb. Like we talked about in the beginning, too much of that low-end rumble on a lot of different tracks is going to create a really muddy mix. So if you already corrected it on all your tracks and then you start adding in reverb that has that low-end rumble, you're going to create the same issue. Pretty much every reverb plugin has its own EQ settings here. So you can just go in here and adjust them how you see fit. Or if you have your reverb going to a bus, you can add an EQ on that as well. All right, next we're going to talk about the order in which you should mix. One of my biggest mistakes starting out was mixing in song sections. So I would do the intro, the verses, the chorus, bridge, drops, anything like that. I would do them all together. But the problem with that is you tend to forget what you've done in the other sections, and sometimes it doesn't really match up. Now I usually mix in instrument sections. So usually I'll start with the drums. So I'll mix the drums from the intro to the outro all the way, make sure they sound good together. And then I'll move on usually to the basses, and then I'll go to the melodies, which has the leads and the chords, and then I'll do any kind of effects like risers and things like that, and then I'll end with vocals. I found that doing it this way creates a more evenly leveled mix all the way throughout. The next tip is to use both studio headphones and studio monitors to mix your track. When I'm mixing, I'm constantly bouncing back and forth, so I'll listen to a section on my headphones, see how it sounds, and then I'll take my headphones off and play it just through my speakers and see what that sounds like. A lot of times the mix will sound good on one and not the other, so you switch and try to make it sound good on the one that wasn't sounding good, and then when you go back, it doesn't sound great on the one that it did sound good on. So it's a lot of trial and error, bouncing back and forth, making sure that the changes that you're making are sounding good on both the speakers and the headphones. Sometimes after I have it sounding really good on the monitors and my studio headphones, I'll actually mix a little bit with my Apple AirPods or earbuds to see if I'm getting some good sound out of those as well. Another tip related to that is using as many listening environments as you can. So that means once you get your mix sounding good on your studio speakers and headphones, and maybe even your AirPods, bounce it out, send it to yourself in an email or airdrop it to your phone, and try it in a bunch of different settings. So take it out to your car, try it out there. Try it on just your laptop speakers. Try it on a small Bluetooth speaker. If you didn't already do any mixing with your AirPods, try using your AirPods now. Don't forget to check it on your phone, obviously, because a lot of music is listened to on phones nowadays. And just keep trying different listening environments to see if anything sticks out. You're going to be listening much more critically than an average listener, so you're probably going to hear imperfections in each listening environment. So don't stress too much about it. Just do as best as you can to get it as close as you can to sounding good in every environment. All right, and the final tip I want to discuss for today is using reference tracks. I like to do 3 to 5 tracks total. 2 or 3 of those tracks are usually used in the production process, and that's to kind of get my sound design together. If there's a song that I think is the direction of the song that I'm working on, then I want to kind of get some of the production elements as close to that song as possible. And then I use 1 or 2 more reference tracks in the mixing process. If you're mixing without a reference track, something might sound good to you because you're listening to it very closely, but then when you hold it up against a reference track, you might find out that something like the snare was way too low, and you were listening to it in extreme focus, so you heard it, but when you compared it with the reference track, you realize that the reference track had it much louder in the mix. So it's little things like that that are going to pop out at you when you use a reference track. A couple ways that I like to use reference tracks is sometimes I'll just throw one right in my track and I'll label it reference. And that's kind of just a quick and dirty way of referencing. But my much more recommended way of referencing is using a referencing plugin. So these type of plugins are cool because they allow you to match the levels. They also allow some visual representation of the reference, so you can kind of see what the EQ looks like as you're going through. And with one click, you can just jump back and forth from your original to the reference. So for this song, I was really trying to go for like a Justin Bieber pop rap type beat, and I took a lot of inspiration from his song Intentions. So that's the track that we're referencing today. As you can see, we started here with our original. And then all we have to do is click in the center here and it'll bounce back to the reference, and then we can go back and forth and see the difference and pick out some points that we really want to focus on. Just make them drop dead, you a killer. Shower you with cooking up, got your own bread. So for instance, I might notice that the hi-hats are a little bit much in my track, and I can just grab them and bring them down. Or if I wanted to turn them up, if they felt like they were lacking at all, then you can turn them up and then jump back and forth and keep going like that. Kind of focus out one element at a time and get it as close as possible to the reference. So there it is. These techniques helped me a lot to improve my mixes and help me understand why maybe they weren't sounding as good as I wanted them to. So hopefully they'll help you out as well. If you start applying these techniques to your mixes, drop a comment and let us know which one's working out the best for you. If you already apply any of these techniques to your mixes, let us know if you have any other ones that you prefer. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe here and follow along with all the content that we release. Also, feel free to head over to sandscapeaudio.com and check out some of the resources that we have over there available. All right, y'all, that's it for this one. I'll catch you in the next one.